The massive alien creature towered over the battlefield, its obsidian scales reflecting the fires of war around it. Imperial forces scattered in terror as the beast carved through their reinforced battle tanks like they were made of paper. Only one man stood unafraid: Marcus Reed, the same human scout who had once cradled this terrifying creature as a dying cub in his arms. The beast turned its enormous head toward him, intelligent eyes locking with his. In that moment, armies of 3 different species held their breath, watching as this human somehow commanded the most feared predator in the known galaxy, with nothing but a whispered word. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The desolate landscape of Proxima Centauri b stretched before Marcus Reed like an endless sea of rust and shadow. The planet's crimson soil crunched beneath his boots as he trudged forward, the weight of his exploration pack digging into his shoulders. His breathing came in controlled bursts, filtered through the thin atmospheric mask that covered the lower half of his face. The twin suns hung low on the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the barren terrain. Marcus checked his equipment for the 100th time that day. Oxygen levels, 64%. Water supply, 42%. Food rations, adequate for another 3 days. Battery power for communications, dwindling but sufficient. His mission was simple: scout the unexplored regions of Proxima b and report back any findings to the research base established on the planet's northern hemisphere. Humanity had only recently gained the technology for interstellar travel, and every scrap of information about potentially habitable worlds was invaluable. The expedition had been unremarkable until new soil samples, atmospheric readings, and topographical mapping. Standard procedure. Nothing that would make history. Marcus had been chosen for this solo expedition due to his experience as a former military scout and his ability to maintain composure in isolation. 6 years in the Special Reconnaissance Regiment had taught him to appreciate solitude, to find comfort in the quiet. But even he had to admit that the silence of an alien world carried a different weight altogether. His comm device buzzed, breaking the stillness. "Reed, this is base. Status report?" The voice of Dr. Elena Chen, the expedition leader, crackled through his earpiece. Marcus paused, casting his gaze across the horizon before responding. "All clear, Doc. Nothing but rocks and dust for the past 12 kilometers. Atmospheric readings consistent with previous samples. No signs of water or biological activity." "Understood. You're approaching the edge of your designated search grid. Complete your current sweep and begin return journey at 1,800 hours. "Copy that," Marcus replied, his voice even. He wasn't ready to head back just yet, though. There was something about this area that nagged at his instincts: an irregularity in the terrain that his trained eyes had noticed on the satellite imagery during briefing. A slight depression in the landscape that didn't match the natural erosion patterns of the rest of the region. "Actually, Doc, I'd like to extend my search pattern to grid sector 7B. There's a geological formation I want to check out." There was a brief silence on the other end of the comm. "That's outside your authorized zone, Reed. What's so interesting about it?" "Probably nothing," Marcus admitted. "But the topography suggests a possible impact site. Could be a meteorite worth sampling." Another pause. "Fine, you have 2 hours, but maintain regular comm checks every 15 minutes. "Will do. Read out." Marcus adjusted his course, heading toward the anomaly that had caught his interest. As he drew closer, the depression in the landscape became more defined: a crater, roughly 200 meters in diameter. The edges were sharp like a recent impact, but had been weathered by time and the harsh elements of Proxima b. This was old, possibly ancient. The descent into the crater was gradual. Marcus carefully picked his way down the slope, his boots sliding occasionally on the loose soil. His training kicked in, eyes constantly scanning for potential hazards, cataloging every detail. The crater floor was littered with debris: no natural rock formations, but metallic fragments scattered across the crimson dust. Marcus crouched down, picking up a piece of what looked like hull plating. The metal was unlike anything he had seen before, lighter than aluminum, but with the strength of titanium, based on how it resisted his attempt to bend it. The surface was covered in strange, flowing patterns that might have been decorative or functional. Definitely not natural, and certainly not human in origin. His heart rate quickened. This was it, the discovery that every explorer dreams of. First contact, or at least evidence of it. He activated his wrist computer and began documenting everything, taking samples, scanning the fragments, recording detailed observations. "Bass, this is Reed," he reported, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "I've found something. Definitely artificial. Definitely not ours." "Say again, Reed?" Dr. Chen's voice was sharp with sudden interest. "I'm in what appears to be an impact crater, but it's filled with debris of artificial origin. I think I'm looking at the remains of a crashed spacecraft, non-human design." "Are you certain? This could be debris from one of our earlier probe missions." Marcus shook his head, though she couldn't see it. "Negative. The technology is far beyond our capabilities, and based on the weathering patterns, this crash is old. Centuries, maybe millennia." "Incredible," Dr. Chen breathed. "Document everything. I'm sending a research team your way, but they won't arrive until tomorrow morning. Until then, you're our eyes and ears." "Understood," Marcus replied, already moving deeper into the crater. Following the trail of debris, the scattered fragments led him to what must have been the main impact site. Partially buried in the crimson soil was a larger section of the craft, a twisted mass of the same strange metal, roughly the size of a small shuttle. Unlike the smaller pieces, this section seemed more intact, its original form still discernible beneath the damage. It resembled the prow of a ship, sleek and predatory, with what might have been weapons emplacements along its sides. A warship, Marcus realized. He was looking at the remains of an alien warship. The implications sent his mind racing. A military vessel meant a military species, possibly a spacefaring civilization, engaged in interstellar conflict. The age of the wreckage suggested this battle had occurred long before humanity had even dreamed of reaching the stars. They were latecomers to a galaxy that had already witnessed wars between the stars. Marcus approached the partial hull cautiously, his training overtaking his excitement. Even an ancient battlefield could harbor dangers, unexploded ordnance, structural instabilities, or environmental hazards. He scanned for radiation and other potential threats before drawing closer. The hull bore scars of intense combat, not just crash damage, but what appeared to be weapons fire. Deep gouges and melted sections told a story of the ship's final moments. Marcus ran his gloved hand along one such scar, feeling the smooth depression where something had burned through the supposedly indestructible metal. As he circled the wreckage, he noticed a gap in the hull, an opening just large enough for him to squeeze through. It might have been a doorway once, or perhaps a breach caused by whatever had brought the ship down. Either way, it offered access to the interior. Marcus hesitated. Protocol dictated that he should wait for the research team before attempting to enter any alien structure. The risks were too great: unknown pathogens, booby traps, or simply structural collapse. But something drew him forward, a combination of professional curiosity and something more primal, the explorer's instinct that had driven humans to cross oceans, climb mountains, and now reach for the stars. "Bass, I've located a major section of the vessel," he reported. "I can access the interior. Request permission to proceed." Dr. Chen's response was immediate and expected. "Negative, Reed. Too many unknowns. Maintain position and continue external documentation only." "Copy that," Marcus replied automatically, even as his eyes remained fixed on the opening. He knew she was right, but the pull of discovery was strong. He was about to turn away when he heard a sound so faint that at first he thought he had imagined it. A soft, keening noise coming from within the wreckage. Not mechanical, but organic. Almost like a whimper. Marcus froze, listening intently. There it was again, weak, but unmistakable. Something was alive in there. Protocol be damned. If there was a survivor, however unlikely after all this time, he couldn't just stand by. "Bass, I'm picking up sounds from inside the wreckage. Possible signs of life. I'm going in to investigate." "Reed, do not enter that structure." "Doctor." Chen's voice rose in alarm. "That's a direct order. Something's alive in there, Doc. I have to check it out." Before she could protest further, Marcus switched his comm to passive mode. He could hear incoming transmissions but wouldn't respond. He needed to focus. The opening in the hull was jagged, forcing Marcus to remove his pack and push it ahead of him as he squeezed through. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the faint light filtering through from outside and the beam of his helmet lamp. The air was stale but breathable according to his masks. Sensors the ship's hull had maintained a partial seal all these years. The corridor he found himself in sloped downward at an angle, evidence of how the ship had come to rest after impact. The walls were lined with the same flowing patterns he had observed on the exterior, but here they seemed to pulse with a faint, residual energy, bioluminescent, or perhaps some form of power system still functioning at minimal levels. Marcus moved carefully, testing each step before committing his weight. The structure creaked around him, a constant reminder of its precarious state. The sound that had drawn him in came again, louder now, guiding him deeper into the vessel. He passed through what might have been crew quarter spaces, too alien in design to be certain of their function, but sized for beings not dissimilar to humans in scale. No bodies, though. Whatever species had crewed this vessel had either evacuated or been removed after the crash. The whimpering led him to what appeared to be a central chamber, larger than the others he had passed. Unlike the rest of the ship, this room showed signs of having been deliberately sealed the entrance, partially barricaded from the inside with debris. Marcus carefully moved aside enough of the blockage to squeeze through, his light sweeping across the space beyond. The chamber might have been a command center, or perhaps a secure vault. Control panels lined the walls, their surfaces dark and lifeless. In the center of the room was a raised platform, and upon it, a nest-like structure made from what looked like pieces of the ship's interior components and what might have been clothing or bedding materials. And in the center of that nest lay the source of the sound, a creature unlike anything Marcus had ever seen or imagined. It was small, no larger than a house cat, with a body covered in scales that might have once been iridescent but now appeared dull and matte. 6 limbs, 4 that resembled legs, and 2 smaller appendages that could be arms were curled tightly against its body. Its head was elongated with sensory organs that might have been eyes, though they were closed. Most striking was the small crest of spines that ran from the top of its head down its back, currently lying flat. The creature was clearly young, a cub or infant of whatever species it belonged to. And it was dying. Its breathing was shallow and irregular, its body trembling with each intake of air. It looked emaciated, as though it had been slowly starving in this tomb of a ship for who knew how long. Marcus approached slowly, mindful not to startle the creature. It sensed his presence nonetheless, its eyes, 3 of them. He now saw opening to reveal vertical pupils surrounded by irises of deep amber. The whimpering increased in volume, though whether from fear or hope, he couldn't tell. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said softly, knowing the creature couldn't understand him, but hoping his tone would convey his intentions. "What are you doing here all alone?" The cub tried to rise, but lacked the strength, collapsing back into its makeshift nest with a pitiful sound. Up close, Marcus could see evidence of what might have been wounds, long healed into scars across its small body. This creature had survived whatever battle had claimed this ship, perhaps protected by a parent that was now gone. Marcus knew he should report this immediately, should wait for the research team with their xenobiologists and proper containment protocols. But the creature was dying before his eyes. By the time help arrived, it would be too late. He made his decision in an instant, guided not by protocol or scientific curiosity, but by simple compassion. Reaching into his pack, he withdrew his water container and a protein ration. He had no idea if these would be compatible with the creature's biology, but dehydration and starvation looked the same across species. "Let's try to get some fluids in you," he murmured, creating a small depression in his palm and pouring a tiny amount of water into it. Carefully, he brought his hand to the creature's mouth, or what he assumed was its mouth, a small opening beneath its sensory organs. At first, the cub recoiled, but the scent of water proved too tempting. It extended a small, forked tongue and tentatively tasted the liquid. Then, with growing enthusiasm, it began to lap at the water, its weakness momentarily forgotten in the face of this life-sustaining gift. Encouraged, Marcus broke off a small piece of the protein bar, softened it with water, and offered it next. The cub sniffed at it cautiously, before consuming it with surprising speed. Whatever this species was, it appeared omnivorous enough to accept human food. As he continued to provide small amounts of water and food, Marcus activated his comm. "Bass, this is Reed. You're not going to believe what I found." Hours later, Marcus sat beside the small alien creature, watching as it slept more peacefully now. He had constructed a makeshift carrier from his pack, creating a secure and comfortable space for the cub. After consuming a surprising amount of his rations and water, it had curled up and fallen into what appeared to be a healing sleep. The research team was en route, their arrival accelerated by his discovery. Dr. Chen had been furious at first, then incredulous, and finally, reluctantly impressed by what he had found. The scientific significance was incalculable. A living specimen of an unknown spacefaring species, possibly the last of its kind. "We still don't know if it's dangerous, Reed," she had warned over the comm. "Keep it contained and monitor for any aggressive behavior." But Marcus saw no aggression in the small creature, only vulnerability and a fierce will to survive. In the hours they had spent together, he had observed its behavior closely. It was intelligent, that much was obvious from the way it studied him when awake, the curiosity in those amber eyes. And it seemed to understand that he was helping it, growing less fearful with each interaction. As night fell on Proxima b, Marcus made camp at the edge of the crater, the cub's carrier secured beside him. He had decided to name it Kairos after the Greek concept of the opportune moment, the right time for action. Finding this creature felt like such a moment, a crossroads of fate. "What secrets do you hold, little Kairos?" he whispered as he checked on the sleeping alien. "What will you become?" He couldn't have known then how prophetic that question would prove to be. 3 days later, the research base on Proxima b was abuzz with activity. The discovery of the alien cub, now officially designated Xenofauna specimen Alpha, but still called Kairos by Marcus, had transformed the previously methodical scientific outpost into a hive of excitement and debate. Marcus stood outside the quarantine habitat that had been hastily constructed to house the creature, watching through the observation window as Dr. Chen and her team of xenobiologists conducted their better examination. Kairos had regained strength remarkably quickly, now moving about with ease, exploring its new environment with cautious curiosity. "Fascinating cellular structure," Dr. Chen was saying, her eyes fixed on a tablet displaying microscopic imagery. "Unlike anything in our database. The scales aren't just armor, they're sensory organs, possibly capable of detecting electromagnetic fields. And the metabolism rate is extraordinary. No wonder it consumes so much of your rations, Red." Marcus nodded, more interested in the cub's behavior than its biology. In the short time since its rescue, Kairos had displayed remarkable intelligence. It had quickly learned the routine of the habitat, anticipating feeding times and even responding to simple gestural commands. Most intriguingly, it seemed to recognize Marcus, showing visible excitement whenever he entered the observation area. "What I want to know is how it survived in that wreckage," Marcus said. "Based on your estimates, that ship crashed centuries ago. Even if it was in some form of stasis, no creature should have lasted that long without sustenance." Dr. Chen looked up from her tablet, her expression thoughtful. "We've been analyzing tissue samples. This species appears to have extraordinary regenerative capabilities and can enter a state of near-complete metabolic shutdown when resources are scarce. Essentially, it can hibernate for extended periods, aging very little during that time. So, it could be much older than it appears," Marcus mused, watching as Kairos attempted to stack objects in its habitat, a behavior that suggested problem-solving intelligence. "Precisely. And we have no idea what its mature form might be like, or how quickly it will develop," Dr. Chen continued. "Based on its current growth rate since receiving proper nutrition, we're looking at an organism with potentially accelerated development compared to terrestrial standards." A commotion from inside the habitat drew their attention. Kairos had managed to climb onto a shelf that was supposed to be beyond its reach, knocking over equipment in the process. One of the researchers moved to retrieve it, reaching out with gloved hands. The change in the cub was instantaneous and startling. The spines along its back and head rose to their full height, revealing vivid color patterns previously hidden. A sound emanated from its throat, not the whimper Marcus had first heard, but a sharp, warning hiss. The researcher froze, then slowly backed away. First sign of defensive posturing, Dr. Chen noted clinically, though Marcus could hear the tension in her voice. Interesting that it perceives Dr. Kazuo as a threat, but has never displayed such behavior toward you. Red. Marcus stepped closer to the observation window. Kairos, he called softly. It's all right. The effect was immediate. The cub's attention snapped to Marcus, its spines lowering slightly. It made a different vocalization now, a series of clicks, and what sounded almost like purring. Remarkable. Dr. Chen breathed. It's imprinted on you. Probably associates you with survival since you were the one who rescued and fed it initially. Marcus felt an unexpected sense of responsibility at her words. Imprinting suggested a bond, a connection that went beyond mere familiarity. If this creature had indeed formed such an attachment to him, what did that mean for its future? For his? What happens to it now? He asked. Once you've completed your studies? Dr. Chen's expression became guarded. That's not my decision to make. Earth Central will want the specimen transported to a proper research facility. The potential applications of its biology, along with the regenerative capabilities, the adaptive metabolism could revolutionize medicine. And the fact that it's sentient? Intelligent? End quote. Marcus pressed, unable to keep the edge from his voice. We don't know that it's sentient, not by any scientific definition, Dr. Chen replied carefully. It displays impressive cognitive abilities for what appears to be a juvenile organism. Yes, but assigning human concepts like sentience to an alien life form is problematic at best. Marcus wanted to argue, but knew it would be futile. To the scientific establishment and the corporate interests that funded their expedition, Kairos was a specimen first, a living being second, and he was just a scout, his job done the moment he had delivered his discovery to the proper authorities. But as he watched Kairos settle down again, those amber eyes never leaving his face, even through the barrier of the observation window, Marcus knew this was far from over. He had made a connection with this creature, had saved its life. That created a bond that transcended species, transcended worlds. 1 week turned into 2, then a month. The research on Kairos continued, yielding more questions than answers. The cub's growth was accelerating, its body changing in ways that both fascinated and alarmed the scientific team. What had once been the size of a house cat was now closer to a large dog, its musculature becoming more defined, its movements more assured. More concerning to some were the changes in its skeletal structure. X-ray imaging revealed additional growth plates in what had appeared to be vestigial, features suggesting that the creature's mature form might be dramatically different from its current appearance. Marcus had fought for and won the right to work directly with Kairos, arguing that the creature's trust in him created a unique opportunity for behavioral studies. In reality, he simply couldn't bring himself to abandon the alien he had rescued. Every day, he spent hours in the Bach habitat, observing, interacting, and increasingly, communicating. They had developed a rudimentary form of sign language, a combination of gestures and vocalizations that allowed for basic exchanges. Kairos could indicate hunger, curiosity, contentment, or displeasure. It understood simple commands and showed an almost disturbing ability to solve problems presented to it as tests. It's learning at an exponential rate, Marcus reported during one of the daily briefings. Yesterday it figured out the locking mechanism on the feeding station after watching Dr. Patel input the sequence just once. That's concerning, said Commander Hayes, the military liaison who had arrived with the second research team from Earth. His presence was a reminder of the strategic interests at play. Any species capable of interstellar warfare represented both opportunity and threat to humanity's fledgling space program. It's fascinating, Marcus countered. We're witnessing the development of an advanced intelligence in real time. Hayes fixed in with a hard stare. What we're witnessing, Reed, is the growth of an organism that may become dangerous. The structural changes in its physiology suggest a predatory mature form. The ship it was found in was clearly a warship. Connect the dots. We don't know that, Marcus argued. We don't know anything about its species culture or biology beyond what we've observed. Making assumptions based on limited data is bad science and potentially worse policy. Dr. Chen intervened before the tension could escalate further. Gentlemen, please. Our job is to gather information, not speculate on worst-case scenarios. Commander Hayes, your concerns are noted. Mr. Reed, please continue your behavioral observations, but be mindful of security protocols. The meeting concluded shortly after, but Hayes caught up with Marcus in the corridor outside. You're too close to this thing, Reed, he said without preamble. You've formed an attachment that's compromising your cane. Objectivity. Marcus didn't deny it. I found it. I saved it. That creates a certain responsibility. Your responsibility is to your species, not to some alien carnivore that might grow into a threat, Hayes countered, his voice low. Earth Central is sending a specialized transport. The specimen is being relocated to the Lunar Research Station for more intensive study. The news hit Marcus like a physical blow. When? 6 weeks. And before you think about objecting, the decision is final. This comes from the highest levels. As Hayes walked away, Marcus stood motionless, his mind racing. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to convince them that Kairos wasn't a threat, that separating them could be disastrous for the creature's development. 6 weeks to figure out an alternative. That evening, he entered Kairos's habitat with a heavier heart than usual. The alien seemed to sense his creed, mood immediately, abandoning its exploration of a new puzzle toy to approach him, head tilted in what Marcus had come to recognize as an inquiring posture. Hey, buddy, Marcus said softly, crouching down to the creature's level. We might have a problem. Kairos made a series of clicking sounds, then raised one of its front limbs, a gesture they had established to mean it was listening or wanted more information. Marcus hadn't planned to attempt explaining the situation, knowing the limitations of their communication system. But in that moment, faced with those intelligent eyes, he found himself trying anyway. They want to take you away, he said simply, making the gesture for separation they had established during their sessions. To another place, for more tests. Kairos went still, its 3 eyes fixed unblinkingly on Marcus's face. Then it made a sound he had never heard before, a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. The spines along its back rose slightly, not in threat display but in what Marcus had come to interpret as intense concentration. Then, to his utter shock, Kairos lifted both front limbs and made a series of gestures he had never taught. It complex, fluid movements that couldn't possibly be random. What are you trying to tell me? Marcus whispered, leaning closer. Kairos repeated the sequence, then reached out and touched Marcus's chest, directly over his heart. It held its limb there for a moment before withdrawing it and placing it over its own chest area. The meaning seemed clear, even across the gulf of different biologies and cultures. Connection, unity, perhaps even loyalty. Whatever Kairos was trying to communicate, it involved the bond between them. I won't let them take you, Marcus promised, not knowing how he could possibly keep such a pledge, but feeling its weight nonetheless. We'll figure something out. As he left the habitat that night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The connection between him and Kairos had deepened, evolved into something beyond scientific observation or even friendship. He felt as though he had pledged himself to a course of action from which there could be no deviation. What he couldn't know was that Kairos understood far more than anyone suspected. And that night, as it lay in its habitat under the artificial lights designed to mimic Proxima B's day cycle, something within its alien biology continued to change, continued to grow, continued to evolve. Its time of vulnerability was coming to an end. The 6 weeks passed more quickly than Marcus had anticipated, filled with intense study and increasingly complex interactions with Kairos. The alien's growth had continued at an accelerated pace, its form now the size of a large wolf. Its intelligence had developed correspondingly. It now understood hundreds of human words and could communicate basic concepts through the sign language they had developed together. Most remarkable was its ability to draw. Given access to digital tablets, Kairos had demonstrated not only fine motor control, but also abstract thinking, creating images that seemed to represent both its current environment and what Kerr, Marcus believed were memories of its homeworld or species. One image in particular had caused a stir among the research team, a drawing of what appeared to be fully mature members of Kairos's species. If accurate, the adult form was formidable, indeed bipedal, but heavily muscled, with the same 6 limbs, but now clearly differentiated into legs and arms. The head crest had developed into an impressive array of spines, and the overall size was imposing, towering over the human figures Kairos had included for scale. Commander Hayes had used the drawing as further evidence that the creature should be contained and studied under higher security. If that's what it grows into, we're talking about an apex predator with human-level intelligence or higher, he had argued. Not something we want roaming free. Marcus had countered that intelligence suggested the capacity for reason and cooperation, not inherent threat. But he knew he was losing the battle for Kairos's future. The transport was scheduled to arrive in 3 days, and all his attempts to secure a position on the research team at the Lunar facility had been denied. Tonight was his last scheduled session with Kairos, before the preparations for transport would begin. He entered the habitat with a heavy heart, carrying with him a small device he had prepared in secret, a locator beacon that would allow him to track Kairos's location anywhere in the solar system. It wasn't much, but it was something, a thread of connection he could maintain. Kairos was waiting for him, as always. But something was different. The alien was perfectly still, seated in the center of the habitat in what almost looked like a meditative posture. Its eyes opened as Marcus approached, tracking his movement with unnerving precision. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said softly. "I brought you something." He held out the small beacon, no larger than a coin. Kairos examined it carefully, then looked up at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. To his surprise, the alien made a series of gestures that translated roughly to, "Not needed." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean? I want to be able to find you after—" He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. Kairos rose to its full height, impressive now. Reaching nearly to Marcus's chest and made another series of gestures. Time. Change. Together. Before Marcus could ask for clarification, the habitat's lighting suddenly flickered, then dimmed. The security door at the entrance slid shut with an ominous hiss of hydraulics. "What the?" Marcus began, turning toward the door. When he looked back, the words died in his throat. Kairos was changing before his eyes. The alien's body seemed to shimmer, its scales rippling as if heated from within. The spines along its back extended, revealing complex patterns that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Most dramatic was the change in its size. It was growing, rapidly, its form expanding and shifting in a process that should have taken months or years happening in minutes. Marcus stumbled backward, his training warring with his trust in the creature. "Kairos, what's happening to you?" The alien continued its transformation, its limbs elongating, musculature becoming more defined. The process appeared neither painful nor violent, more like an accelerated version of natural development, as though Kairos had been holding back its true growth until this moment. When the transformation finally slowed, the being that stood before Marcus was no longer the cub he had rescued. It was the creature from Kairos's drawing stall, powerful, with an unmistakable aura of predatory grace. Its head now crowned with a full array of spines that shifted color with what seemed to be emotional states. Its 3 eyes glowed with intelligence and something else, purpose. Marcus should have been terrified. Every instinct should have been screaming danger. Yet he felt only awe and a strange sense of recognition. This was still Kairos, the being he had bonded with, had taught and learned from. Changed, yes, but not fundamentally different. Then Kairos spoke, not in gestures or clicks, but in clear, slightly accented English. "Marcus Reed," it said, its voice resonant and multitoned, as though multiple vocal organs were working in concert. "I have waited for this moment since you found me." Marcus could only stare, his mind struggling to process what was happening. You can speak our language?" "I have been learning from all of you," Kairos replied. "Your words, your thoughts, your emotions. My species absorbs knowledge through proximity. We grow in response to our environment, adapting to threats and opportunities alike. Your growth, this transformation," Marcus gestured at Kairos's new form, You controlled it? Delayed it? Kairos inclined its head in what had become their shared gesture for affirmation. I remained in juvenile form while I assessed the situation, while I learned about you, about humans. I needed to understand if you were like those who destroyed my people. The implications struck Marcus with full force. The ship, it wasn't your species' vessel. It was an enemy. Yes. My people were peaceful explorers who encountered a race that knew only conquest. That ship was part of an armada that destroyed our world. Kairos's spines shifted to a deep blue, which Marcus had come to associate with sadness or regret. I was an infant, placed in a stasis pod by my mother as our ship attempted to escape. When we were struck, the pod ejected, programmed to seek habitable conditions. It crashed within the enemy vessel, buried deep enough to escape detection. You were in stasis for centuries, Marcus breathed. Until I found you. Until you chose compassion over caution, Kairos corrected. Now, we must make another choice, quickly. Your military leader plans to take me by force before your transport arrives. He has received new orders to secure me as a strategic asset by any means necessary. Alarm shot through Marcus. Hayes? How do you know this? I can sense electromagnetic communications. Your species broadcasts your thoughts through your technology. Kairos moved closer, its movement fluid despite its newly transformed body. They will be here within minutes. We must leave. Leave? And go where? Marcus asked, his mind racing to keep up with these revelations. To warn others. Your species is young among the stars, but you are following a dangerous path. There are older, more powerful civilizations watching. Concerned about your development, your commander Hayes seeks to weaponize me, to use my biology to create weapons against these civilizations. End quote. Marcus wanted to deny it, to defend humanity, but he had seen enough of politics and military thinking to know Kairos might be right. Not all humans think that way, he said instead. Many of us want peaceful contact, mutual exchange. I know. That is why I revealed myself to you, why I trust you. Kairos extended one of its upper limbs, the gesture unmistakably an offered hand. Come with me, Marcus read. Be the bridge between your kind and the others. Help me prevent another war among the stars. The choice should have been impossible, abandoning his species, his world, everything he had ever known. But in that moment, looking into the alien eyes of the being he had saved and who had now chosen him as an ally, Marcus felt a clarity he had never experienced before. He took Kairos's hand. How do we get out of here? The base is secure, and they'll be watching all the shuttles. Kairos's spine shifted to a color Marcus had never seen before, a shimmering silver that seemed to reflect light from within. My transformation was not merely physical. Certain abilities dormant in juvenile form are now active. As if to demonstrate, Kairos placed its other hand against the wall of the habitat. The material, reinforced polycarbon designed to contain unknown biological threats, began to ripple and dissolve, molecules rearranging themselves at Kairos's command. My species can manipulate matter at a quantum level, Kairos explained as a hole large enough for both of them formed in the wall. It is why we were hunted. Others feared this ability could be weaponized. Alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Red emergency lights flashed, casting eerie shadows across the corridor beyond the habitat. This way, Marcus said, taking the lead, drawing on his military training. If we can reach the vehicle bay, we might be able to secure a rover. From there, we could make it to the emergency shuttle. They moved swiftly through the corridors, an unlikely Perthea human scout and the towering alien. Whenever they encountered a sealed door or security barrier, Kairos would simply touch it, and the obstacle would yield. Marcus realized with growing amazement that Kairos could interface directly with electronic systems, bending them to its will. A squad of security personnel appeared at the far end of the B corridor, weapons raised. Stop right there, one of them shouted. Reed, step away from the specimen. Instead, Marcus moved in front of Kairos protectively. We're leaving, he called back. No one needs to get hurt. Final warning. The security officer responded, taking aim. What happened next occurred too quickly for Marcus to fully process. Kairos moved with blinding speed, placing itself between Marcus and the security team. There was a flash of light as the weapons discharged, but the energy seemed to bend around Kairos's form, dissipating harmlessly. Then Kairos raised one hand, and a wave of force, invisible but undeniable, swept down the corridor. The security team was lifted off their feet and gently but firmly pressed against the ceiling, their weapons clattering to the floor. "I do not wish to harm them," Kairos said, turning to Marcus. "But we must hurry." They reached the vehicle bay without further resistance. Marcus quickly located the keys to one of the larger rovers, designed for extended exploration missions. "This should get us to the emergency shuttle," he said as they boarded the vehicle. "But Hayes will have that location locked down too." "Drive," Kairos said simply. "I will handle any obstacles." The rover burst from the bay doors and out onto the rust-colored landscape of Proxima B. Marcus pushed the vehicle to its limits, racing toward the ridge where the emergency shuttle was housed. Behind them, the base had mobilized its resources. 2 security rovers were in pursuit, and in the distance, Marcus could see a combat helicopter lifting off, a recent addition to the base's defenses that he hadn't been briefed on. "We've got company," he said grimly, eyeing the rear-view display. Kairos turned in its seat, which strained under its transformed weight, and gazed back at their pursuers. "Your Commander Hayes has authorized lethal force," its CAI stated. "He would rather see me dead and beyond his control." The helicopter gained on them rapidly, moving into firing position. Marcus swerved the rover erratically, trying to make them a harder target, but on the open terrain, there was little cover to be found. "Kairos, I don't know if we're going to make it," he admitted, eyes fixed on the shuttle installation now visible on the horizon. The alien placed one of its hands on Marcus's shoulder. "Trust me," it said simply. The helicopter opened fire, a spray of high-velocity rounds kicking up dust just meters from their vehicle. The next barrage would not miss. Marcus braced himself, but Kairos had risen to its full height, its body partially emerging from the rover's roof hatch. The alien raised both arms toward the sky, its spines flaring to that same shimmering silver hue. The air around them seemed to thicken, to warp like heat distortion on a summer road. The helicopter's next salvo of rounds simply stopped in midair, hovering impossibly before dropping harmlessly to the ground. Then Kairos made a gesture as if he, gently setting something down, and the helicopter itself began to descend, its engines still roaring but no longer providing lift. It settled onto the ground some distance away, undamaged but effectively neutralized. "What did you do?" Marcus asked, awestruck, as Kairos retook its seat. "Localized gravitational manipulation," the alien replied. "Temporary, but effective." They reached the shuttle installation minutes later. As Marcus had feared, it was guarded. But the small security detail took one look at the approaching rover, with its alien passenger, and wisely chose to retreat rather than engage. The shuttle itself was a simple craft, designed for functionality rather than comfort, little more than a cockpit with basic life support and enough fuel to reach orbit. Marcus had trained on the system, but had never expected to use it under these circumstances. As they boarded, he hesitated. "Kairos, once we leave the surface, where exactly are we going?" The alien was interfacing with the shuttle's systems, its hands moving over the control panels with surprising dexterity. "There is a place at the edge of your solar system," it said. "A gathering point for observers from many civilizations. Those who watch emerging spacefaring species, who decide whether to welcome them or quarantine them. Like a galactic United Nations?" Marcus suggested, strapping himself into the pilot's seat and beginning the launch sequence. "Similar, though with greater consequences for violations of its principles," Kairos confirmed. "They have been debating humanity's status for some time. Your discovery of faster-than-light travel has accelerated their timeline for making a decision." The shuttle's engines ignited, pressing them back into their seats as the craft climbed rapidly through Proxima B's thin atmosphere. Marcus watched through the viewport as the research base dwindled beneath them, becoming just another feature in the alien landscape. "They're going to think I've been abducted," he mused, "or that I've gone rogue. In time, they will understand," Kairos assured him. What matters now is reaching the conclave before your military leaders can take more aggressive action. My presence, and yours, will force them to render judgment on humanity's readiness for contact. As the shuttle achieved orbit, Marcus felt a profound sense of displacement. Everything he had known as duty, his world, his species was now behind him. Ahead lay something entirely unknown, a journey with an alien being who had transformed from vulnerable cub to powerful ally in mere weeks. "Will I ever be able to return home?" he asked quietly. Kairos turned those three amber eyes upon him, its expression unreadable, but somehow gentle. "That will depend on what kind of home humanity chooses to build. Among the stars," Marcus read, "and perhaps on what we accomplish together." The shuttle's navigation system chimed, indicating readiness for the next phase of their journey. Beyond the viewport, the endless void of space beckoned, filled with possibilities neither of them could fully imagine. "Set course for the outer system," Kairos instructed. "I will guide you from there." Marcus entered the commands, and the shuttle's secondary engines engaged, propelling them away from Proxima B and into the unknown. 5 years later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Conclave's central space station, watching as the diplomatic vessels from Earth approached. The massive crystalline structure of the station refracted starlight in dazzling patterns across the viewport. But his attention was fixed on the approaching ships. Kairos moved to stand beside him, its form now fully matured. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, its obsidian scales shifted with subtle iridescence. The impressive crest of spines along its head and back currently relaxed in a neutral position. In the years since their escape from Proxima B, Kairos had continued to grow in both physical stature and abilities. What had once been a dying cub now commanded respect even among the most ancient species of the Conclave. "Nervous?" the alien asked, its resonant voice carrying the faintest hint of amusement. Marcus smiled despite himself. "Wouldn't you be? 5 years as a fugitive, and now I'm about to face representatives from Earth as an official Conclave mediator." "They requested you specifically," Kairos reminded him. "That suggests they are more interested in reconciliation than retribution." Much had changed in those 5 years. Their arrival at the Conclave had caused a sensation, the first human to make contact with the galactic community, accompanied by a species long thought extinct. The Kairosia, as Kairos's people were known, had been revered for their wisdom and technological achievements before their apparent destruction centuries ago by the warlike Vrex Empire. The revelation that some Kairosia had survived by placing emissaries in stasis pods, strategically positioned to be found by emerging civilizations, had profound implications. These emissaries were meant to guide promising species away from the path of destruction, to prevent them from becoming either victims or successors to the Vrex. Marcus had expected to be treated as a traitor, perhaps even a thief of alien technology. Instead, he found himself in the role of humanity's unofficial ambassador. While Earth governments initially demanded his return to face charges, the Conclave had granted him diplomatic protection, recognizing his unique position as a bridge between species. Over time, he had worked with Kairos to establish preliminary communication channels between Earth and the Conclave. The knowledge and technologies they shared, carefully selected to benefit humanity without accelerating military capabilities, had helped convince Earth's leaders that peaceful cooperation offered more advantages than confrontation. Now, finally, an official Earth delegation was arriving to negotiate formal recognition and exchange. "The ships are requesting docking clearance," announced a melodic voice from the station's communication system. "Earth Diplomatic Mission Alpha, commanded by Admiral Chen." Marcus raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Elena Chen? The research director from Proxima B?" "Your Dr. Chen has risen quickly in Earth's Unified Space Command," Kairos observed. "Her experiences with us apparently gave her valuable insight into interspecies relations." As the Earth vessels docked, Marcus straightened his formal attire robes, designed according to Conclave diplomatic protocols, but incorporating subtle Earth elements. He was no longer just a scout, or even just a human. He was a recognized interspecies mediator, entrusted with facilitating first contact between civilizations. The airlock cycled, and the Earth delegation emerged. Admiral Chen led the group, her familiar face now framed with silver-streaked hair and bearing the dignified confidence of high command. Behind her came a diverse team of scientists, diplomats, and cultural experts, humanity putting its best foot forward. Chen's eyes found Marcus immediately, widening slightly at the sight of Kairos towering beside him. Then she composed herself and stepped forward. "Marcus Reed," she said formally. "On behalf of the United Earth Government, I greet you." "Admiral Chen," Marcus replied with equal formality. "On behalf of the conclave of sentient species, I welcome Earth's representatives." There was a moment of tension as protocol dictated, then Chen's face softened into a smile. "It's good to see you, Reed. You've led us on quite a chase." "Not intentionally," he assured her. "How are things back home?" "Changed," she said simply. "The technologies you shared through the conclave have helped us address many of our environmental crises. Medical applications from Kairosia regenerative. Biology have revolutionized treatment of previously terminal conditions. And the knowledge that we're not alone in the universe has shifted perspectives." "And Hayes?" Marcus couldn't help asking. "Last I heard, he was advocating for military preparation against alien threats." Chen's expression tightened momentarily. "Director Hayes remains influential in certain circles, but his more extreme positions have been moderated. The evidence of beneficial contact has been too compelling to ignore." Kairos, who had remained respectfully silent during the human greetings, now inclined its head toward Chen. "Admiral, I am pleased that your species has chosen the path of cooperation. The conclave has much to offer Earth, and Earth has much to offer in return." Chen looked up at the towering alien, her scientific curiosity evident beneath her diplomatic composure. "When I first examined you as a cub, I could never have imagined this. You've grown into something truly magnificent, as has your understanding," Kairos replied graciously. "Now, let us proceed to the conclave chamber. The representatives of 17 spacefaring civilizations await to formally welcome humanity to the galactic community." As they walked through the station's crystalline corridors, Marcus felt a profound sense of rightness. 5 years ago, he had made a seemingly impossible choice to leave his world behind for an uncertain future with an alien creature he barely understood. Now that choice had helped pave the way for humanity's peaceful integration into a larger community of intelligence. The conclave chamber was a vast spherical space, with representatives of various species arranged on platforms that accommodated their diverse physiologies. At the center was the speaker's dais, occupied by a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline exoskeleton that shimmered with constantly shifting patterns of light. As Marcus took his place beside Kairos, preparing to introduce humanity's representatives to the assembled members of the conclave, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a desolate crater on Proxima b to this moment of historic significance. From finding a dying alien cub to standing alongside a being now revered throughout known space. He glanced at Kairos, whose scales rippled with anticipation, spine slightly raised in what Marcus had learned to recognize as excitement. The being caught his look and returned it with a subtle gesture that had become their private sign of connection over the years. "Nervous?" Marcus whispered, echoing Kairos's earlier question. The massive alien's 3 eyes gleamed with what might have been amusement. "With you beside me? Never." The formal proceedings began, the speaker's melodic tones welcoming humanity to the greater community of worlds. As Marcus translated the complex concepts into terms the Earth delegation could fully grasp, he knew that the universe had been forever changed by a simple act of compassion in a crashed warship. He had found a starving alien cub, saved it from death, and watched it grow into something that terrified and awed entire civilizations. But to Marcus, Kairos would always be the vulnerable creature that had trusted him when it had every reason to fear, that had chosen cooperation when it could have sought revenge. And together, they had shown humanity that there was a better path forward among the stars than fear and force. A path where different species could learn from one another, grow together, and face the challenges of an infinite universe not as competitors, but as allies. As the Earth delegation stepped forward to address the conclave for the first time, Marcus knew that his journey with Kairos was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, remaining factions on Earth resistant to alien influence, the ever-present threat of the Vrex Empire at the galaxy's edge, and the complex dance of interspecies politics within the conclave itself. But whatever came next, they would face it together, the human scout and the alien he had rescued, who had in turn rescued him and perhaps his entire species from a darker path. And somewhere out among the stars, other Kyrosia emissaries waited in stasis, ready to guide other emerging civilizations toward the light of cooperation rather than the shadow of conflict. The cycle would continue, species rising and falling, learning and growing, making their choices about what kind of presence they would be in the vast tapestry of cosmic life. For Marcus Reed, the choice had been simple: in the end to protect the vulnerable, to choose understanding over fear, to recognize intelligence and value it, regardless of its form. And that choice had opened doors he could never have imagined when he first stepped into that ancient crashed warship and heard the faint whimper of a dying alien cub. His story would be told across worlds for generations to come, the human explorer who found a starving alien cub under a crashed warship, who watched it grow into something terrifying, and who helped forge a bond between species that would reshape the destiny of entire civilizations. But for Marcus, standing beside his alien friend as history unfolded around them, it had never been about making history. It had simply been about doing what was right, one moment at a time. And in the end, perhaps that was the most profound lesson that humanity could learn from its first steps into the wider galactic community: that compassion, even across the vast gulfs of species and worlds, might be the most powerful force in the universe.